Welcome back, World History students, to the third part of our discussion on the Punic Wars and Rome and Carthage's conflict. Now, last time we talked about the fact that Hannibal had won an amazing string of victories against the Romans. In fact, he had won 4 battles, 3 of which were devastating to the Romans. He had defeated them and destroyed their armies, killed their leaders, and any normal nation, any normal empire at this point would have said enough is enough. We give up. We're going to throw in the towel. And Hannibal sent ambassadors to Rome expecting that this would be the case. And of course, the Roman Senate basically said, no, not only do we not want to stop fighting, we're not even going to negotiate. Like we have nothing to say to you because that's how stubborn we are. We're going to keep fighting. And Rome, in the next 14 years, because it takes 14 years to win the war, is going to produce an incredible number of armies. It's going to send its generals all throughout the Mediterranean world. And it's going to beat Carthage. And it's going to beat Carthage really through sheer determination and rugged resilience. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, remember, Hannibal's strategy has been to invade Italy. And by doing so, he is going to convince Rome's allies that they no longer want to support the Roman Empire. Instead, they want to support Carthage. They want to switch sides. And after the Battle of Cannae, Hannibal had experienced a very small amount of success with this strategy. He had convinced the city of Cannae and a few others to switch sides and to begin supporting Carthage rather than Rome. But this strategy never worked as well as Hannibal had hoped. Hannibal had hoped that almost the entirety of Rome's allies would defect, and they didn't. They stayed loyal. And really, it was not the Italian cities that decided to join Carthage. It was actually some empires and some cities that were independent. The two main people that joined with the Carthaginians were the Macedonians and the Syracusans. And let's take those in order. Macedon, of course, is the nation that produced Alexander the Great. And of course, it was the Macedonian Empire under Alexander the Great that extended all the way to India. Then you'll remember we talked about the breakdown of the Macedonian Empire. We have all of those successors fighting for the throne. And remember that, to summarize that entire thing, we have 3 empires that are the remains of Alexander's empire. We have Ptolemaic Egypt, ruled by the Ptolemies. We have Seleucid Persia, ruled by the Seleucids, and we have Antigonid Macedonia, ruled by the Antigonids. And remember, Ptolemy, Seleucus, and the descendants of Antigonid had taken over those places. Now, Macedon, in the intervening time, has conquered a few of its neighbors and is looking around, and it realizes that it has a big problem on its hands. The king of Macedon at this time is Philip V, not Philip II. Remember, that was the father of Alexander the Great, but this is Philip V. Philip V is concerned because Rome, a few years before the Punic Wars broke out, had taken over a few cities near him. In fact, the Romans had taken over an area that we commonly refer to as Illyria, or southern Illyria, really. And the problem is this, that once Rome takes over a few cities close to you, eventually, the concern is that Rome will take over the rest of cities near you. Right? Syracuse had a similar concern back in the First Punic War. Carthage controlled all the cities around them. What was preventing Carthage from taking them over? Now, interestingly enough, Syracuse also, along with Philip V, felt like they were in a similar situation. Rome controlled all of Sicily except Syracuse. And Syracuse began to worry that perhaps eventually the Romans are going to be coming for us. So, with this victory at Cannae, Philip V decides he is going to attack the Romans. He's going to try and take those cities back from the Romans that had been conquered. They weren't his cities originally, but he's going to try and drive the Romans out of Illyria, out of his back door, and he's going to defeat Rome. That's his plan. And Syracuse has a similar plan. They're going to drive Rome out of Sicily and take over Sicily for themselves. They are going to be the masters of Sicily. And this is where Macedon and Syracuse and Carthage all badly miscalculated. Because Rome, rather than sit down and give up, which is what most nations would have done, Rome picked itself back up after Cannae, and it came after its enemies with a vengeance. The first thing that Rome does is it reinstates our friend Fabius. Remember Fabius? Fabius was the guy who followed Hannibal around. And the Roman Senate calls Fabius back to them, and they say, Fabius, you were right. Your strategy of not attacking Hannibal was the right one. We're sorry that we doubted you. Will you again lead our armies in Italy? And Fabius, of course, says, yes, I will. I'll lead your armies in Italy. I'm not going to engage Hannibal. I'm going to follow him around. I'm going to attack his men when they're distracted, when they're gathering food, when they're wandering around by themselves, but I'm not going to go to battle with Carthage. I'm going to last him out. And the Senate says, yes, this is a good idea. So Fabius follows Hannibal around, never engaging in battle, but following him around. The Senate then looks at Philip V and Syracuse, who have now attacked Rome, and they say, you think we are down and out? We are not. And they send armies under consuls to Illyria and to Sicily. And through a series of campaigns, Philip V is forced to retreat, and Syracuse is conquered. In fact, Syracuse is destroyed. In reality, it's rebuilt by the Romans later on, but it's destroyed. And the most famous citizen of Syracuse, the famous inventor Archimedes, is killed. And if you don't know anything about Archimedes, I'll have to tell you about him when we get back together in person. Put a pin in that. Remember to ask me about Archimedes in class. But he's killed, and Syracuse is defeated. So while Syracuse and the Macedonians believe the Romans were down and out, were down on their luck, if you will, the Romans not only rebuilt their army in Italy, but they sent armies to Sicily and to Greece to fight on their behalf. But that wasn't all they did. The Romans, in fact, created more armies, if you can believe it. Because while Carthage had been attacking them in Italy, Carthage was building up its forces in Spain. Because remember that after the First Punic War, Carthage had invested a lot of money and resources in Spain. They had conquered most of Spain. They were pulling a lot of troops and a lot of wealth out of Spain. And so the Romans decide to send an army to Spain. And that army is going to hopefully defeat the Carthaginians. And if they can defeat the Carthaginians there, maybe they can draw Hannibal out of Italy. Maybe if they defeat Carthage there, Hannibal will quit and go home. We'll see if he does that in a little bit. Now, the person they choose to send over there is an interesting guy. His name, we're just going to call him Scipio. Now, Scipio was a young man. He came from a noble household, a famous household, a household whose ancestors had held the consulship before. But young Scipio has not. In fact, young Scipio is in his 20s or 30s. He's young. He's not really battle-tested. He's been in a few fights, but he's never been a commander. And young Scipio walks into the Senate, and he says, Senate, I heard that you're sending armies to Spain, and the best thing for you to do would be to put me in charge. And I will go to Spain, and I will defeat the Carthaginians there. And I will defeat them so soundly that Hannibal will leave Italy. And the Senate, it takes a few minutes to talk amongst itself, and they're impressed by this young man's his courage, his forwardness, right? I mean, he just walks into all of the most famous men of Rome, and he just says, I am the best warrior there is, I'm the best general there is, send me. And they go, okay, Scipio, but we have a lot of armies, right? We've got armies in Macedon, we've got armies in Sicily, we've got armies in Italy. We don't have a lot of troops to spare, so you're not going to get a big army. And Scipio says, it doesn't matter. You send me with an army, and I will defeat the Carthaginians. And so the Senate says, Scipio, fine, you are in charge. We're not going to send a consul. We're going to send you. You go to Spain. And so Scipio does. He takes his legions, his small legions, and he goes to Spain. And in Spain, we have three generals. They're all related to Hannibal. We've got Hasdrubal, the brother of Hannibal. We've got Mago, the brother of Hannibal. And we've got Hamilcar, who may have been another brother of Hannibal. We're not sure because, again, I told you that the Carthaginians all use the same name. So we've got another Hamilcar over here. So maybe he's the brother of Hannibal, maybe not. But we've got three armies. And these three armies all outnumber Scipio's army, 1-on-1. So if all three of them had been in the same place, Scipio never could have won. He would have been outnumbered more than 3-1. And Scipio realizes that the only chance he's got is he needs to get into Spain, and he needs to beat one of these three armies as quickly as possible before the other two armies can help out. And that's the only way that he's going to have a chance. He's going to level the playing field by doing this. And so he decides to attack Hasdrubal. And Hasdrubal is a pretty good general, but he's no Hannibal. Right? He's a pretty good general, but he's no Hannibal. And Scipio, in fact, has studied. He heard reports of the battles of Hannibal, and he has picked up Hannibal's techniques. So Hasdrubal and Scipio face off, and Scipio sends his legions forward right into the middle of the Carthaginians. And the Carthaginians engage, and they think that they're winning. And in fact, the Romans don't seem to be pressing forward. But the reality was that Scipio was pulling a Hannibal, and he had snuck his cavalry around the battlefield. And in the middle of the battle, the Roman cavalry charged out of the woods, came in from behind, and suddenly pinched the Carthaginians between the Roman infantry and the Roman cavalry. And the Roman infantry surged forward because Scipio, of course, was expecting this to happen. And the Carthaginian army was crushed in between, and it shattered. Men ran. Thousands of men were cut down as they ran. Hasdrubal got away and ran back to his brother Mago. And this is a great disaster. An entire Carthaginian army is destroyed. So Hannibal's destroyed 3 armies. Scipio now has destroyed 1 army. Now, the Carthaginians in Spain have a big problem because not only do they now have Scipio, who's clearly a pretty good general, he wiped out an entire army. Okay, they know that he's pretty good. He's not someone that they can leave alone. They also get a message from Hannibal. Hannibal's got a problem. You see, this dumb Fabius guy, this guy who just follows Hannibal around and never engages him, is causing him problems. Hannibal says to his brothers this: I haven't been able to fight a battle. The Romans are so afraid of me that they won't fight. But the problem is this: I'm running out of money to pay my troops. I'm running out of money. I don't have any money because I can't fight any battles. If I can't fight any battles, I can't steal Roman money, which means that I don't have the money I need to pay my troops. And my troops are getting bored, right? Warriors who signed up to come fight the Romans are getting bored. They're like, we're not fighting Romans. I'm going to go home, right? I don't want to just stomp around Italy for the rest of my life. I want to kill some Romans. And no matter what Hannibal does, he just can't get Fabius to fight. He lines up in battle, and Fabius just stays in his camp, right? And Hannibal's not dumb enough to charge uphill to attack a camp. So Fabius just follows Hannibal around. He never engages him. He picks off men who stray too far from Hannibal's army, but he never fights. And so Hannibal asks his brothers, hey, I need you to send reinforcements. I need enough troops that I can attack the city of Rome itself. I'm going to end the war by attacking the city of Rome itself. So now these Carthaginian generals in Spain have a problem. They've got Scipio. They have to beat him somehow. But Hannibal also needs an army. So what they decide to do is they decide that Hasdrubal is going to take most of the army, and he's going to do the exact same thing Hannibal had done. He's going to march north. He's going to march across Gaul, or modern-day France. He's going to cross the Alps, and he's going to enter Italy. And he's going to totally take the Romans by surprise. The Romans are so busy fighting in all these different places, they're never going to see Hasdrubal coming. That's the plan. And the rest of the army, under Mago and Hamilcar, it's going to retreat to New Carthage, which is the biggest Carthaginian city in Spain. They're going to hide behind the walls there. And Scipio might attack them, but he can't win. And Hannibal's going to win the war, and they're not going to have to deal with Scipio. That's the plan. So Hasdrubal takes off. He goes north with most of the army. Mago and Hamilcar run south to New Carthage, or if you want to know what it's called today, it's called Cartagena. That's the modern Spanish city that New Carthage eventually became. And this is where the plan falls apart, because both parts of the plan don't work. Because Hasdrubal, he marches along the same path as his brother. He even makes it through the Alps. Very impressive. The problem is that Scipio heard reports of what Hasdrubal was going to do. Maybe a Carthaginian soldier ran away and was captured by the Romans, and he gave them the plan. We don't know. But Scipio finds out what the plan is. And so he sends a fast ship to Rome, and he says, Hasdrubal is coming across the Alps. He's not that great of a general. You guys need to catch him. You need to put an army in front of him, and you need to destroy him. And that's exactly what the Romans do. At the Battle of Metaurus in 207 BC, a Roman army catches Hasdrubal, and they beat him on the battlefield because he is no Hannibal, right? The Romans pile up, they fight him right in the middle, his line breaks, and the Romans catch Hasdrubal and they kill him. They actually behead him. And Hasdrubal's army falls apart. A few scattered soldiers make it to Hannibal, but most of his army is destroyed. And so Hannibal doesn't have the troops that he needs. Hannibal wanted enough troops to attack Rome. He didn't get enough troops to attack Rome. And in fact, while he's sitting in camp, the Romans went and flung the head of his brother into the camp. So it's kind of a bad day for Hannibal, right? Not only did you not get the troops you need, but your brother's dead, and here's his head. Ha ha, we killed him. Right? That's what the Romans are doing to Hannibal. So Hannibal is stuck. He can walk around Italy, he can threaten towns, but he can't really do anything. Fabius is following him around, just like he always is. And Scipio surprises Mago and Hamilcar at New Carthage. He attacks New Carthage, and he takes the city. And the way he did this is he was very intelligent. He looked at the surroundings of the city, and the Carthaginians thought that one side of the city was protected by a lagoon. If you don't know what a lagoon is an area of water that normally has a narrow mouth onto a much larger area of water. So the Mediterranean Sea is up along the coast, and there's a lagoon. Basically a little lake that has an entryway to the ocean, and it protects one of the sides of New Carthage. And what Scipio does is he finds a local who knows the lagoon, and this local tells him that at certain times during low tide, the water comes down so far that you can actually walk across the lagoon. And Scipio realizes that he can use this to take the city. So what he does is he sends a small number of his troops to attack the city on one side. All the Carthaginian soldiers run to that side because they think that's where the attack is going. And Scipio, with the rest of his army, sneaks across the lagoon during low tide, and they climb the other side of the wall, and they take out the Carthaginians inside the city. And so the greatest city of Carthage in Spain falls to Scipio. And Mago and Hamilcar run, and they try and regather their army, and Scipio chases them down, and they fight in a huge battle at a place called Ilipa, and Scipio beats them again. In fact, he destroys their army. The brothers of Hannibal, Mago and Hamilcar, they escape, but their army is destroyed. And so now Scipio has taken Spain away from the Carthaginians. He's taken it away, and now they have to figure out what to do. Well, Scipio, he is not done yet. In fact, he returns to Italy in triumph, and he gathers up even more troops, and he actually sets sail for Africa. So Hannibal's still marching around Italy, and now Scipio is going to invade Carthage itself. And now we have a big problem for the Carthaginians, because the Carthaginians try and throw what little troops they have at Scipio. He beats them easily. He attacks several important Carthaginian towns. He takes them over. And Carthage is forced to send a message to Hannibal. And it says this: Hannibal, you must return. Now imagine getting that message as Hannibal. Hannibal has been stomping around Italy since 218 BC. It's 204 BC by this point. Hannibal has been in Italy for 14 years. He's never lost a battle. In fact, of the 4 battles he fought, 3 of them were complete Roman disasters. He destroyed the entire Roman army. Any other nation would have given up. But Hannibal has now been stomping around Italy for 14 years. It's been 12 years since he last fought a battle. And the Romans just won't give up. Fabius is still following him around, waiting for Hannibal to make a mistake, and now Hannibal is recalled. And the problem is this: with Fabius right on his tail, with Roman ships patrolling the coast, the Carthaginians say to Hannibal, we can get you out, maybe a few of your commanders, but we can't get your army out. So your army is going to have to be left behind. And so Hannibal, in 204 BC, is forced to leave Italy, and finally Fabius has his opportunity. Fabius pounces on Hannibal's army and destroys it, sells off the survivors into slavery, and it's gone. And Hannibal returns to Carthage, very bitter, very upset with the Carthaginian leaders, because he has won the war, at least in his own mind. He's won the war. He's beaten the Romans, and the Romans just won't quit. And the Carthaginians kept losing other battles, which allowed Rome to keep fighting. Well, now Carthage is given a choice. They have to do one of 2 things. They can either attempt to invade another location, or they can fight on their home turf. And Scipio is getting closer and closer to the city of Carthage, and they really don't have any options. They have to fight on home turf. And so Hannibal gathers up the largest Carthaginian army of the war, and he goes out to meet Scipio. Now, this is one of the few situations where the Carthaginians actually outnumber the Romans. There are more Carthaginian soldiers than there are Roman soldiers. This is not the norm. Normally, the Romans outnumber the Carthaginians, especially in Italy. So Hannibal's been winning these battles where he's outnumbered. But he outnumbers the Romans this time. So you might think that Carthage is going to win. But here's one thing that we haven't talked about yet that's super important, and that is the experience level of soldiers. So just like any other job, experience when it comes to being a soldier is very important. Think about sports, right? You guys play sports or are familiar with sports. If you have played soccer or football, the best sport, American football, if you've played a sport for 10 years and you're playing against someone who's only played for 1 year, who do you expect to win? Well, you expect the person that's played for 10 years, even if physically they are the same. We expect the person that has experience to win, or at least to act in a smarter way, right? A first-year player is going to make dumb mistakes. An experienced player is not going to make mistakes. Well, the same thing is true in warfare. And one of the big differences between Hannibal's troops and his Roman opponents at the beginning of the war was that Carthage's army was experienced. The army of Hannibal had fought in Spain for a decade before they invaded Italy, meaning that when Hannibal was winning these great victories, his troops had served under him for 10, 12, 15, 20 years. They were experienced. They knew what he wanted, probably before he even ordered it. That's how good they were. The army that Hannibal has now is brand new. Most of the people in his army have literally picked up a spear and a shield just a few days beforehand. Carthage says, we need everybody. And they throw them together. Hannibal even brings elephants, but these elephants are young and not well trained. They've never seen battle before. And that's true of all of Hannibal's army. Scipio, on the other hand, he has veteran troops that have served for 10 or 15 years of conflict. So the tables have turned. It used to be Hannibal's troops were the experienced troops, and now it's Scipio's troops that are experienced, and Hannibal's troops that are rookies, fresh. So the battle begins. Hannibal sends his war elephants out against the Romans, and the Romans, with all of their experience, deal with the elephants perfectly. They line up in rows, they create holes in their line, and they allow the elephants to charge right through, and then they send their cavalry, who are now Numidian warriors, these African warriors who are supposed to be the best horsemen on earth. They've switched sides. They used to fight for Carthage, now they fight for Rome. These African horsemen follow the elephants, and they throw spears and arrows at the elephants, and actually the elephants just keep going. They run through the Roman army without crushing anyone, and they're attacked, and so they just keep running right off the battlefield. And the Roman troops reform. And so suddenly Hannibal has lost his elephants. And the Roman troops march into the Carthaginian troops, and the Numidian cavalry turn around and they attack the Carthaginian cavalry, and the Carthaginian cavalry loses. They run off the battlefield, and soon Carthage's army finds itself in a very similar situation to that army at Cannae. That great defeat of the Romans is almost played out in reverse. Now it is the Romans who are surrounding the Carthaginians, and Hannibal knows what's about to happen. He orders his men to run. And they run off the battlefield. And thousands are killed, but many survive. But in effect, the war is over. Hannibal and his troops make it back inside the city of Carthage, but Scipio now has surrounded the city. He digs in for a siege. And after about a year, the Carthaginians finally give up. And we have a great dramatic shift. What before was two great empires is now Rome dominating almost the entirety of the Western Mediterranean, and the single city of Carthage. And that single city of Carthage is forced to give up, to surrender. And the terms of this surrender are strict. Rome says you are not allowed to have a navy of more than a few ships, and if you do, we will destroy you. You are not allowed to have colonies. You may only have your own city. You are not allowed to raise armies without our consent. Effectively, Carthage is reduced to the status of a subordinate ally to Rome. No longer are they an empire, but they're defeated. Now, the reality is that Rome, through 16 years of war, from 218 BC to 202 BC, had emerged as the most powerful empire, not only in the Mediterranean, which it certainly was at this point, but in reality it was on its way to becoming the most powerful empire in world history. And it would go on to dominate the rest of the Mediterranean, and it would have a influence that would last for thousands of years. In fact, if we can say 202 is the moment that Rome has become the most powerful empire on earth, it will stay as the most powerful empire on earth until 476 AD, which is when the Western Roman Empire falls. But if we count the Eastern Roman Empire, Rome will last until 1453 AD. So in any way you slice it, Rome lasts at least 600 more years, and possibly as many as 1,600 more years. Right? Rome is now established as one of the most important civilizations that ever exists. And it's established as important this way because it's won the war. Now we'll conclude with the fate of Hannibal, because Hannibal is not killed immediately. The Romans don't even demand Hannibal as a prisoner. right? That might be what you think they would do, right? Hannibal's killed all these Romans. We demand him as a prisoner. The Romans, for the moment, say, no, Hannibal, you can go back to living your life. You served as a general, yes, but we're not going to make you become a prisoner. But Hannibal doesn't trust the Romans. He thinks that eventually the Romans will come asking for his head, and so he actually leaves Carthage. He leaves it behind, and he travels to the east, and he fights for the Macedonian kings, the Persian kings, the Egyptian kings. He fights for those successors of Alexander, and he actually eventually does come into conflict with some Romans, although he doesn't fight them very often. And apparently, while traveling in the east, in the city of Rhodes, he bumps into someone. He bumps into Scipio, who, when he came back from Africa, he was hailed by the Roman Senate as Scipio Africanus, which is how we know him today. Scipio Africanus, the Scipio who conquered Africa. Scipio Africanus is traveling in the city of Rhodes, and he happens to find out that Hannibal's in the city, and he sends a messenger to Hannibal and says, Hannibal, will you have dinner with me? I would like to talk to you. And Hannibal says, of course, Scipio. Why don't you come by? And so Hannibal and Scipio are eating dinner together on the roof of their house, because that's where sophisticated Greek and Romans ate their dinners. They're eating on the top of the house, and Hannibal's speaking with Scipio. And Scipio, near the end of the conversation, he asks Hannibal, can I ask you something? And Hannibal says, of course. And Scipio says, Hannibal, who is the greatest general of all time? And Hannibal immediately responds, and he says, of course, Scipio, you know the answer to that. And of course the answer is Alexander the Great. And Scipio nods his head and he goes, yes, that's true. And he asks Hannibal then, all right, who is the second greatest general of all time? And Hannibal says, well, that's easy. And of course you know the answer. And the answer is me. I'm the second greatest general of all time. I won all these battles. I crushed the Romans. And Scipio, maybe he nods his head, maybe smiles a bit at Hannibal's arrogance. And he asks, okay, Hannibal, who is the third greatest general of all time? And of course, we know what Scipio wants to hear. He wants to hear himself. And Hannibal responds, well, Pyrrhus of Epirus is the third greatest general of all time. And Scipio perhaps smiled, we're not told. And he asks Hannibal this question, right? Because Hannibal, is perhaps being cheeky at this point. Scipio Africanus was a great general, after all. And he asks Hannibal, it strikes me that you might change your mind if someone different had won the Battle of Zama. So let me ask you this, Hannibal. If you had won the Battle of Zama rather than I, who would be the greatest general of all time? You or Alexander the Great? Hannibal smiled. He said, I can't answer that question because I didn't win that battle. Right? So basically this story, and it probably didn't happen exactly like that, but it's a fun story nonetheless. That's what Roman authors tell us happened. Perhaps it didn't happen that way. What this story tells us is that Hannibal, of course, was a great general, but Hannibal had one glaring problem. One problem that made him worse than Alexander the Great, and that is that he lost. Eventually, even the greatest general faces a situation that he can't win. And Hannibal and Napoleon are similar in those situations. Napoleon was, again, one of the greatest generals who have ever lived, perhaps one of the greatest, top three. And yet eventually he lost a battle to the Duke of Wellington at Waterloo in 1815. And eventually, no matter how good of a general you are, if your nation can't continue to fight, you will lose. And that's Hannibal's experience. And so with that, Scipio and Hannibal finish their dinner and they go their separate ways. Scipio Africanus dies of old age in Rome. Hannibal is killed, perhaps by taking his own life. Perhaps he's assassinated. We're not sure. Some people believe that the Romans had sent assassins after him, although we don't know. And with Hannibal dies the last hope of Carthage. Now, there is a third war. I told you in the last lecture there is a third Punic War, but it's really nothing like the first two. The Third Punic War is really a bully match where the all-powerful Rome just smushes the ant that is Carthage. Carthage supposedly violated the treaty that ended the Second Punic War. If they really did, we're not sure. And so Rome attacks Carthage, and it literally burns the city to the ground and destroys it and salts the earth. Salt is poisonous to crops, so the Romans salt the earth, saying that Carthage shall never be rebuilt. It is rebuilt. In fact, it exists today as a settlement close to the city of Tunis. Julius Caesar actually rebuilds Carthage. But the Carthaginians are defeated, and the defeat of Carthage sets the entire world on a completely different course, one that is going to be dominated by Rome. Today, you are in many ways a descendant of Rome. Your cultural practices, the things you do, the words you say, how you describe things, even the religious festivals that you celebrate are influenced by Rome. And we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. Hopefully you've enjoyed this study of the Punic Wars. We could have gone in so much more detail, and I know you're probably like, Mr. Mortar, I couldn't handle that. But I think the Punic Wars are fascinating. Hopefully you do too. See you next time.